Welcome, everybody. I'm Anna Castle, Director of Marketing at Advisicon, and I'm really glad you could join us today. For those of you who are not familiar with Advisicon, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about us. Our mission is clear. We're here to boost your project management efficiencies by optimizing your processes and technologies, which create measurable results, empowering you and your organization. We have over 20 years in the project management industry and are a gold level project partner with Microsoft. So no matter what your company's size, our team specializes in maximizing your business and personal productivity by leveraging the Microsoft technology experience. For those of you who are with us on a weekly basis, you know that today's session is part of our series that we refer to as Webinar Wednesdays. Each topic is different, so we encourage you to check out our upcoming sessions and also give us any insight and feedback into what topics could help you for upcoming new sessions. Today's session is a half hour and also qualifies for a half PDU. I'll tell you more about how to redeem your half PDU at the end of our time together. Because we only have a half hour, we're going to do our best to cover as much as possible, but we might not be able to address your questions during our time together. Please feel free to still utilize the question section on your control panel, and we're going to do our best to follow up as soon after this session as possible. With that, I'd love to hand it over to today's presenter, Mr. Ken Lowen, Advisicon's Director of Client Solutions. Ken?
Thanks very much, Anna. And hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. I'm looking forward to presenting to you on automating your project intake process using Visio and SharePoint Workflow. As Anna said, I am the Director of Client Solutions for Advisicon, and I've been a manager in technology and in general business since the 1990s. I split my time at Advisicon between actively working on client projects and working to scope and propose client projects. So I use these tools that we're talking about on a routine basis. I think you're going to enjoy this, and I echo Anna's request. Please do submit questions using the chat panel, and if we have the opportunity, we will get to them. But I don't want to waste any time. Let's jump in. First of all, let's set the scene. I often tell everybody that every organization does projects. Whether they think about that they do projects or not, just about everybody out there starts with some inputs, goes through some sort of a process, and ends with something transformed from where they started it. And the fact is that when you do a project, whether you think about it as a project or not, you also have an intake process that you may or may not think about. And that intake process could be very simple, it could be very complex. And the opportunity you have is to use tools to support an intake process, and you can have a very complex intake process with a lot of automation on it. You can also have a very straightforward intake process with a lot of automation on it. You've got highly capable tools, however, that make workflow available to you at a relatively low cost. So my goal here is to show you a pretty basic workflow with just a little bit of complexity in it so that maybe you can envision the opportunity to implement some workflow for your organization that will get you over the hump of never having had one, or maybe thinking that this is far too complex. There are a lot of benefits from having a workflow to automate your project intake process. You could use your project intake process formally to collect project suggestions, and frankly it might be that people think that's a little bit too complex to do. Oh, I can't fill out that form, or I couldn't find the form, or gosh, I can't come up with all that information that it takes. Or perhaps you're you invest a lot in training people to execute the project intake process, and they still make mistakes. And so you've got the cost to clean up those errors, whether it's your PM doing it or somebody else in the organization, maybe somebody from finance going through and auditing things. And then you've got to retrain people if you change your process. With a workflow, most or all of those can be eliminated. You can make it fairly straightforward for somebody to be walked through the minimum necessary steps in order to submit a project or to submit a project suggestion, and use the capabilities of the workflow to ask questions of the submitter that will help him or her to determine, do I need to provide more information or not, saving you from errors in executing the process, saving you from putting unnecessary overhead into a process that has the opportunity to be very simple. The tools we're going to be using, we're going to start with Visio. Many of you, perhaps all of you, are familiar with Visio as a visual process diagramming tool. You can also use Visio as a development tool. And I'll show you briefly how we could create a workflow in Visio that we can subsequently import into SharePoint. It uses the same capabilities I've demonstrated in the past, which are to actually connect your Visio shapes up to an underlying data source. It's a very powerful capability, and if you look at some of our other webinars that are available on our YouTube channel, you'll find some information that I've demonstrated on how to do that. SharePoint, it's our basic operating environment. We use that to manage our projects, and we use Project Online for that. If you're not familiar with Project Online, I will show you some of the very basic capabilities, and Anna will present some information at the end on how you can get a free demo environment of Project Online. And if you get a free demo environment of Project Online, you can actually do all of the things that I'm here today in that environment. Within Project Online, some of the things that we're going to use are, we're going to create an enterprise project template, which is a capability that Project Online has to pull together a few different components of a project. A workflow is an optional component, but it's the one we're demonstrating today. You can also have a project schedule, so that when you create a new project using that template, it starts off with the basic steps, processes, predecessors, successors, roles, and so on. If you want to. It also will create project sites for you, and it's a pretty basic capability, and it's the entree or entry point into using a workflow. Phases and stages are used to group the common activities within a project lifecycle, and we'll see how those are done also. The basic steps to creating a workflow start off by determining your requirements and then designing the workflow. Think about, what is it that we have to do? Do we need to collect some information? Do we need to go through some decisions? Is the cost of the workflow over a certain amount, so it's going to require a different approval process than if it was under that amount? Those types of questions you need to go through and document them. And when we're helping clients implement workflows, we go through an interview process in order to gather all of those, and then we diagram the workflow in Visio and go to the next stage, which is determining the custom fields the workflow will use. In this case, you'll see as we get into it that I've created a custom field in Project Online to capture the cost that this proposed project represents. Once you've determined if there are any other custom fields, they could be description fields, they could be justification or support fields, they could be just any number of things about your project. You go into Project Web App and you create those necessary entities. So you make sure that you've got the right workflow phases, the right stages, those enterprise custom fields, and you create or modify your project detail pages in order to display and capture that information. After you've created the basic information that you're going to hook to in Project Web App, you then go into SharePoint Designer, which is a free tool from Microsoft, and construct the workflow. And you can do this by using a text-based designer, which I'll show you today. You can do it using a visual designer, which is essentially like using Visio, or you can import your workflow from Visio, as I've mentioned previously, and I'll show you what that looks like also. Just a quick note, at present, your Visio version and your SharePoint Designer version need to be the same. So you'll see that I'm using Visio Pro 2013 along with SharePoint Designer 2013. After we've done that construction of the workflow, we'll publish it into our Project Web App environment, our Project Online environment, and then we'll go into Project Web App and we'll create an enterprise project type that pulls that together with project sites, project schedule templates, and PDPs, the project detail pages. And then we'll create a project using that. So just a reminder for those those of you who are familiar with the server settings in Project Web App, down here at the lower left-hand corner is the section for workflow and project detail pages. If you're not working with workflow, you won't have spent a lot of time working in here, but this is the place where you'll look for that information. So with that, let's move on into using SharePoint Designer. I've created the information that I need in project, so why don't we can take a quick look at that also. We've got our workflow phases, and so we've got 5 phases that are available to us that we've created. We can create however many that we want to. We've got stages, and we can have as many stages as we want to create. We can have different sets of stages that we use in different workflows. So I've created this automated rejection, initial proposal details, project details phase, and an execution phase. We're going to do a fairly basic, a very basic workflow here. Let me show you in Visio what that looks like. We're going to start off here with our initial proposal details phase. We've got a decision at the end of it, which is looking at the proposal cost, and depending on whether the proposed cost is over a certain dollar value, we'll either go into the automated rejection phase or into the project details phase, and then from the project details phase into the execution phase. Okay, onward. Now, SharePoint Designer. I've opened SharePoint Designer into my project environment. And you can see the URL up at the top there, and I'm going to click on Workflows. And I've got a couple of workflows in there already. The branching workflow is the one we're going to create, so I'll create another one just like it, and I will call it Branching Workflow 2, demo for Webinar Wednesday. And I make sure that the platform type that it's pointing to is SharePoint 2013 Workflow for Project Server. And I click on OK. Okay, we've now got a blank canvas for ourselves, and we're going to start by providing a little bit of structure here. We're in the text-based designer, and so I'm now going to add our stages. And so I click on the Insert Stage button up here and select from the drop-down our initial proposal details phase. And then I'm going to add in, after that, our other stages too. I'm going to have our project details, our automated rejection, and our execution phase. So you saw those 4 stages as boxes on the Visio diagram a few moments ago. Here is where that starts when you're creating that in SharePoint Designer. Now we're going to put the workflow steps and the logic into these stages. We'll start off at the top with our initial proposal details stage, and we're going to insert an action into that. And the action is, the first one's going to be wait for a project event, and that inserts a line here. We're going to click on that project event, and we've got several options here. So we can wait for a project to be checked in, committed, submitted, published, or when the project summary information is published. And we're just going to click on when a project is submitted. Remember that for later, because you'll want to recognize what this event has caused. And then we'll go to, after that has happened, we transition to a stage, and what this is next going to do is we're going to do our logic. So we have our condition, and so we do a common condition of if any value equals value, and in this case we're going to say, we're going to click on the first value, select this function button, and tell this to look in our project data for some fields. And I named my proposal cost field with an underscore at the beginning so that it would be easy to find. And so that we're going to tell it if the proposal cost is greater than, and we'll tell it $25,000 and hit enter. And that is our first event there. And so you'll see that this is now added in sections because of the if. It's added a then space and an else space. And so if this equals, or if this is greater than 25,000, we're then going to go to the automated rejection phase. So we do action, go to a stage, select automated rejection. So when I drop down, I've got a list of the stages that I've built into this workflow already. Otherwise, go to a stage, and we're going to go to a stage in which we can get project details. Okay, so we've now created the initial logic for our project, and we could certainly make this quite a bit more complex, and we could do additional stages and additional steps so that we'd be looking, and we might have said if it's under $25,000, just approve it. We're not going to do anything, and if it's greater than 25,000, send it to somebody to review it and approve it, and that's well within the capabilities of our workflow. We're now going to go down to our project details phase. We're going to make this be very, very straightforward. We're not actually going to update any information in the project details phase. We're just going to move on through the project details phase into our execution phase. So I will tell this to go to stage, that's execution, and automation is, I'm sorry, if it ends in the automated rejection, it's going to go to a stage, and it's actually, if you'll see in this drop-down list, in addition to the 4 stages I've created, it populated it with end of workflow. So it'll just end the workflow. And my execution phase is going to do the same thing. We're just going to tell it, go to the end of the workflow. Got to keep this short in order to capture it all into the remaining 10 minutes that we have here. So now that I've created my workflow, I can check it for errors. I'll just click on the check, and it tells me it has no errors, which is a good thing. And I can save it. And then publish it. And once it publishes it, it's now available in the Project Web App environment to use. And you see down here in the list that the site workflows available in that environment now include the branching workflow I created in this morning's session, the branching workflow 2 that I've just created, and then a project pipeline workflow that was already available in the environment before I started this. So I'm now going to get rid of that window, and I'm now going to go back into my Project Online environment, and I'm going to create a new enterprise project type in order to use that workflow. This top one is the one that I created this morning. So we're going to call this new project submission. Submit your great ideas to help us grow. And my enterprise project type also controls my project ID creation, and I can come down here and I can pick from the available workflows. I could say no workflow. In this case, I'll say my branching workflow 2, and I'm going to select from available new project pages the project information page. And I'm going to put this at the top of my list. I have the option to select a project plan template. I'm not going to do that, and I've selected my default project site template. And I'll save this. And there's my idea at the top of my enterprise project type at the top of the list. I'm now going to go to Project Center, and I'm going to start my new project submission process the way any user would. Click on New. I've got my new project submission right at the top there, and I'm going to select that. And so I had my sliced bread. I had the greatest idea since sliced bread, and we've now got sliced raisin bread. This one, if you remember, my criteria was that the proposal cost greater than $25,000 is going to go into the automated rejection. So I'm going to enter $30,000, which is greater than amount, tab it, and project has reformatted that as dollars. And I'm going to click on Finish. And it's now going to create the basic elements of the project in our environment. And it will come back to us in just a moment now with our workflow status. And the workflow is still processing. So I've got a status message from it right here telling me the workflow is still processing and reminding me to refresh the page in a moment to get updated information. But as part of what I set in my initial proposal details, I said the description of the initial proposal details phase, which is this phase demonstrated in blue here, is set the project name and cost. That's what this is all about. And I have the opportunity in my workflow to change and update status messages as we're going through here. In the same screen, I can look down here at all of the workflow status or stages that are in this particular workflow and see the same message there. So I'm going to click on the refresh up here, and we will get updated information. And I see my workflow stage status has cleared, so it's now ready for the next item. And if you remember, what I said at the beginning was that this workflow needed to wait for a project to be submitted. So here's my submit button up on the project, and so this is telling me the idea is to submit the project as a proposal, and off we go. So that's now processing. It tells me the workflow was initiated, and now the workflow is in progress. And so the workflow is working in the background, and we're going to see this status bar start to change as the workflow moves through. And we're going to refresh a couple more times. So this is showing now that the initial proposal details workflow completed stage. And we now see that the initial proposal details has become pale blue, indicating it finished that stage, and the bright blue indicating where we are now is that we're now in the automated rejection phase, which is where we expected to go because of the proposed cost. And you see that our details around the workflow stages have updated to show that information. We can trigger a lot of other actions about that. We can have it display a message to the user at this point. We can have it send emails. All that's available to us. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to create one that actually will be under our $25,000 floor. And we'll go back into projects, new project submission, and yet another great idea from the crowd. And our proposal cost here is $15,000, which is below our amount. We click on Finish. So the stage that your user could take could be as simple as that particular screen that we had there, or you can have any number of description screens in there so that people will enter additional information describing the process, maybe what caused them to think of the great idea, what impact they think, what new business it'll generate, or whatever is involved in that for you. And then once you have done that, that information will be available to you and captured within Project Online so that you can reference it in the future, and you can look at the ideas that have been submitted and you've got the basic information created. So let's now refresh our page and see what's going on with this workflow now. Okay, it's waiting for us to submit it, just as with the other one, so we will submit this now. And it's processing, it's initiated, and the workflow is in progress. So at this point now, the workflow is going to be looking at that dollar value and determining that it's under the floor, and so that it should move on to, if we look at the initial the project details phase would be the next one, and then it's going to move from there directly into the execution phase. So we'll watch our graphic indicators do that as we refresh our bar. Okay, so it's now moved on through the create phase, which contained our initial proposal details and our project details, are completed. They're marked completed in the all workflow stages window, and the execution phase has been marked, and that's the active phase that we're in right now, and our workflow is indicated as having been completed as we expected. So if you remember, we had our workflow when it found that the dollar value of the proposal cost was below the $25,000, it moved into project details and then it moved into execution, and that's just what happened. So we can now look at our Visio, and if I were to export a workflow out of SharePoint Designer, I would get this exact document, which I did after I did this morning's session. And I can do that in reverse. I can go into File, New for Visio Pro, and I've got this Microsoft SharePoint 2013 workflow, and it'll create a new workflow for me, and it comes up with my stencils for SharePoint 2013 workflow actions, conditions, and components, and it gives me my first stage. And then when I create that, I've got this properties window down here that will become active, and I can enter in the various properties like my stage names and diagram the process in that way, and thereby get to a self-diagramming or self-documenting workflow in SharePoint 2013 using Visio, and in this case we're connecting it up and using it as our intake process in Project Online. We can certainly have the stages of the workflow continue through the project execution, and you could, as an example, have the workflow watch for your project completion percentage, and when your project reaches 100% complete, you could have it trigger a project closeout phase for you and thereby automate that also. So just an interesting technique that I've implemented in a workflow in the past, and I hope this gives you some great ideas for workflows. Anna, have we, looks like we've run out of time for questions. If we've got a really quick one, we could take it. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to you to wrap us up.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ken. You're right. We are out of time, but feel free if you have any further questions, we'd love to talk to you. So feel free to reach out directly to Ken, myself, the whole team here at Advisicon via our website or picking up the phone. Ken, I want to thank you. That was a great session on how to automate our project intake process. Thank you. To everybody who attended today, I'd like to encourage you to show up next week. The topic is how to build and leverage rapid customized views for project. So hopefully another session, half-hour session that's going to be helpful for you in your day-to-day activities. This was a recorded session, and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel by the end of this week. If you haven't visited our YouTube channel, I strongly encourage you to, as all of our other previous sessions are also uploaded there. So feel free to make use of those. Okay, let's talk about the PDU. The only thing I need you to do is fill out the very short survey that's going to populate in your browser as soon as I end our session. As I mentioned at the beginning of our time together, each week we pick a different topic for these sessions, and we would love to invite you into that process. If there's a new technology, a concern, a question, an aid that you would like to see us cover and bring in some additional insight leveraging our resources, we'd love to make that happen. So go ahead and make use of that comment section as well, please. Okay, with that, we're at the end of our half hour, and I want to thank you on behalf of Ken and myself and the whole Advisicon team for spending part of your day with us.